Hello and welcome to the first lecture for Anthropology 105, Evolution and Human Behavior. I am your instructor for the course, Dr. Catherine Demps, and our first lecture is entitled, What is Anthropology? And this is the first part. We're going to be discussing some more details in the next lecture, part 2 of What is Anthropology. So let's think about what this word means. It's a fairly easy word to understand. Anthropo just means humanity, and ology means the study of. So anthropology is just the study of humanity. Now lots of other disciplines study humanity as well, but what makes anthropologists distinctive from psychologists and historians and economists, for example, is that anthropologists use a comprehensive understanding. We study human DNA and genetics, we study opera, we study finance and exchange. We look at a more holistic view of anthropology. We also have a comparative approach, which means that we're interested in studying all humans around the world. So a lot of psychology experiments are done on undergraduate populations, for example, but anthropologists who want to study behaviors about fairness will travel around the world to visit lots of different societies to understand what's the range of variation in ideas about fairness, for example. We also have a synthetic approach, which means that we try to put all of these aspects together. We try to take our comprehensive understanding of human behavior and our comparative understanding of human behavior to get a bigger picture of humanity. Now, some people, like myself and other faculty at this university, think that an evolutionary explanation is a good way to create a synthetic approach to understand all aspects of human behavior. And not everyone agrees with this, and this is one of the topics that we'll be trying to understand more about as we go through the course. So, anthropology tries to answer two big questions. First of all, we're interested in knowing, how do humans differ? What do humans do differently from one another? And what do we do similar to one another? So what do humans share and how do we differ? This is a picture of myself at my field site where I was working in South India. And this is my friend Lakshmi, and you can see that we're dressed rather differently than I would be dressed in my office here at Boise State. I was also eating different food. I had different sleeping habits, and you can see the environment is quite different as well. So one aspect that many anthropologists use to discuss human similarities and differences is culture. I was living in a different culture, and therefore my behavior was different. Another big question that we like to ask is, how are we similar or different from other species? And when we ask this question, we're relying on more of a biological explanation. Although I love this picture because this reminds me of how I feel some mornings when I wake up and before I put on my sari and go to work. So biology can explain a lot of differences between other primates and humans. However, between anthropologists, there's often a great divide between these two types of explanations. A lot of anthropologists who study human similarities and differences from a cultural perspective disagree that we should take a biological perspective, and vice versa. A lot of anthropologists that study humans from a biological perspective don't necessarily think that culture is very important for explaining similarities and differences in human behavior. We're going to be diving into the breach here and trying to use both explanations to get a bigger picture. And this is representative of a lot more recent developments in the field of anthropology. And so this is a really exciting class and a really exciting time to be studying human behavior, because we get to take both a cultural and a biological or evolutionary perspective. But one thing that's quite obvious at first glance is that we are primates. We have all of the hallmark characteristics of other primate species, and we've been characterized as primates by scientists for hundreds of years, since the first biological characterization was set up, in fact. One thing that you'll notice is that we have similar hands to other primates, and these are four left hand prints of a tarsier, an orangutan, a gorilla, and ourselves. And you can see that we all have 5 fingers, just like other mammals. We have special traits adapted for living in the trees, And this includes a grasp, a prehensile grasp with an opposable thumb. We have sensitive fingertips with fingerprints. Other primates have fingerprints as well. And we have nails instead of claws to protect the backs of these sensitive fingers to allow us to reach out and do things like grasp branches. We also have an enhanced sense of vision. And when I think about these characteristics, I often like to compare myself to my pet dog. When you think about how sensitive our hands are versus a dog's front paws. We also, as I said, have an enhanced sense of vision. We have binocular vision, which means that our eyes are moved forward into the front, which allows us to see in 3 dimensions. If you close one eye, you lose your depth perception. And that's what animals with eyes on either side of their head, like horses, they don't have the same type of depth perception that we do. And you can imagine this is very useful when you're living in the trees and you need to know how far away the next branch is, or how far up or down it is. We also have color vision, which allows us to see whether fruit is ripe or not. And finally, we have a reduced sense of smell. So our snouts, the area of our noses and mouths, are much shorter than other mammals in general. When you think of your dog, we have a much shorter nose and mouth in our face. Primates, and this is one thing that we'll talk about quite a bit later in the course, have also a high parental investment. So primate young spend a lot more time dependent on parents, and this orangutan baby, she'll live with her mother for about 7 to 8 years before she moves off and is independent. And the orangutan mother is not having any other children during this time. This is an incredible amount of investment in this one child. And all primates are characterized by the fact that we spend a lot more time and energy caring for our young than other species. You know, we don't have litters. Twinning and having triplets is quite rare in all primates, including humans. And we care for them for a lot longer than, say, a fish would, laying an egg in the water and leaving. So we do have all of these characteristics of primate anatomy, but the big question is, do we have primate behavior? And this is a video of capuchin monkeys, and they're doing a fairness experiment to see, do capuchin monkeys, another species of primate, do they have a sense of fairness similar to our own? So just a quick note, capuchin monkeys like grapes a lot more than they like cucumbers, and the first monkey is going to be offered a cucumber.
Get a grape and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now. Gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
So as you can see, the reason why this video is funny is because we see some sort of sense of fairness evolved in these capuchin monkeys. We're going to be talking a lot more data about how we are and are not similar behavior to other primates, but you can see from this video that anthropology is essentially comparative. We're going to compare ourselves to other primates, and we'll also compare ourselves between cultures. And this is quite obvious when you look at norms and ideas about food and eating across cultures. This is a meal that I had while I was living in India. And one thing that anthropologists have done is gone around the world to different societies and test ideas and values about fairness, and they do differ very widely from society to society. So we're interested in comparing between ourselves and other primates, and also among ourselves as humans. We also try to be comprehensive. We want to understand all aspects of all humans in all places at all times. This is no small task. And critically, the last phrase here, at all times, is the one that we're most uncertain about. So let's talk about that. What do we mean about humans in all times? And that brings up the question of, when do humans begin? This is Ardipithecus ramidus. Ardipithecus, otherwise known as Artie, lived about 5 to 7 million years ago. That's what MYA stands for, million years ago. And Ardipithecus is known as a bipedal ape that we call hominins. So all bipedal apes are hominins. Yes, that means that humans are hominins because we are an ape and we are bipedal. Now, Ardipithecus ramidus looks like most other apes, except for the fact that you've noticed she's standing upright. And Ardipithecus was at least part-time bipedal, which means walking on 2 legs. And one of the reasons we think this was occurring was because the landscape was changing at this time, and so was the diet. So when we talk about when do humans begin, we see the first possible characteristics, the first hallmarks of humanity being related to diet and the environment that these individuals were living in, and the characteristics of bipedality. So we say that hominins begin with bipedalism, and humans are considered hominins. So some of the hallmarks of bipedalism that paleoanthropologists look for when they're characterizing species as a hominin is this list, and it will go on another 4 points after this, but we can kind of do a head, shoulders, knees, and toes approach. So let's start at the top. The first thing that we can look at is the skull, and in the bottom of your skull you have a big hole called the foramen magnum. It's basically what foramen magnum means, big hole. And it's where the spinal cord goes in through the crania and attaches to the brain. Now you can see in the human here on the right that the spinal column goes in directly underneath the skull. And in the chimpanzee on the left, it goes in a little more towards the back. So if the hole is underneath the cranium, then that's a clue that this individual was bipedal because the spinal column goes straight down in the direction of the legs. Humans also have a curved spinal column to bring the center of gravity over the feet. The center of gravity is shifted backwards on the chimpanzee, and this curved spinal problem is what leads to a lot of back problems in modern humans. We also have a bowl-shaped pelvis, and you can see here how if you look at the pelvis on the human versus the chimpanzee, the pelvic blades, those large flat pieces on the human, are facing towards the side, and on the chimpanzee those large flat blades are facing towards the back. And this has to do with how the muscle attachment in the hips work. In humans, when you stand on one leg, you have to clench all of those muscles in your hip to maintain balance. Chimpanzees, because they have a different method of locomotion, either brachiating, swinging by their arms, or quadrupedal, they don't have to have the same bowl-shaped pelvis that we do. We also have to have our thigh bone angled in towards the center of gravity to place the feet directly under the body, as opposed to going straight down parallel like in the chimpanzee. This means that we have bigger knee joints because all of the weight is distributed on 2 legs instead of 4, and you can see how the femur angles out from those knee joints as well to keep the knees in the middle and the hips on the outside. We also have a non-grasping big toe that is in line with the other toes. This means you can toe off when taking a step, or you can sprint on your toes. Chimpanzees and other apes, non-bipedal apes, have a divergent big toe which allows them to grasp trunks and branches as they're climbing. We also have a double arch for shock absorption. So you have an arch going forward to back and an arch going side to side, which creates a cup, which takes a lot of the shock when you're stepping up and down. This is why they don't allow people with flat feet to join the army, because they're worried they don't have the same shock absorption that people with a larger arch do. They'll have complications. We also have very long legs relative to our trunk. You can see in the human how much longer the legs are compared to the trunk, and we also have relatively shorter arms because we're not relying on arms for brachiating or swinging from branch to branch. So a major hallmark of humans is being part of the hominin order and having these characteristics of bipedality. It's tongue-in-cheek the first step towards humanity. But obviously there's a lot more to humans than bipedality, otherwise we would consider Ardipithecus ramidus to be human, and she's obviously not. So what else is it that makes up a human? Well, one thing we can look at is dentition. And if you compare your teeth to a chimpanzee's teeth, you can see there are a lot of differences. And starting with Artie about 5 to 7 million years ago, we can really see a reduction in both the size of the teeth, the shape of the mouth, and especially the size of the canines. And all of these things have gotten smaller over time as we've relied more and more on processed foods and less on manual labor to get things to eat. Another huge factor, and this is what most people come up with first when they think of what makes humans special, is cranial capacity, but this arrived relatively late on the scene. However, humans do have much larger brains than other living primates, and you can see here the human skull is about 2 to 3 times larger than the gorilla skull. Humans have about 1,400 cubic centimeter capacity brain, so if you think about the size of a dice, we have about 1,400 dice in our heads. Gorillas and chimpanzees have much smaller brains than we do, and as did our ancestors. Ardipithecus had a brain about 3/4 the size of ours. So cranial capacity definitely has increased, which led to symbolic behavior. And this is where most people really put humanity's true beginnings behaviorally. These are some beautifully painted lions in Chauvet Cave, in France, from about 30 to 32,000 years ago, and they really evoke the shape and the movement of the animals. They're just beautiful. Before behaviorally modern humans, we don't see any evidence of art, religion, or other symbolic behavior. This behavior doesn't put meat on the fire, shall we say. It's a symbolic behavior. It represents an idea in someone's head that they're putting down on the cave wall. And it's really unique in our lineage. So if we were to look at a timeline of all of these activities, we can see that 5 to 7 million years ago, the first hominins appear, the first bipedal apes, and we can see changes in diet and locomotion, how they get about. Around 2 million years ago, so 3 to 5 million years later, our genus Homo appears on the scene. We are Homo sapiens. There are also many other members of our genus who are now extinct, such as Homo erectus. And these other species were characterized by a large cranial capacity as well. This is when brain size really starts increasing for members of our lineage. About 200,000 years ago, we finally see anatomically modern humans. And these are individuals who, if you met them on the bus, they would look pretty much just like you and me. However, they're not behaviorally modern. They haven't invented religion or complex stone tools or the bow and arrow or any of these things yet. They're just not behaviorally capable of these. We don't really see all of these things coming together until about 50,000 years ago. And this is when most people think that we can characterize people as being truly modern humans. And so if we think about humans this way, we realize that we're imagining humans to be capable of a certain kind of consciousness, and that we're equating humanity with culture. And this is how we can define humans. But one thing that we're going to start thinking about is that culture is also a product of biology. We do have this deep membership in the human primate lineage that goes back millions of years and has been shaped slowly over time. And when you think about something like song, a very symbolic behavior, you can think about it in terms of the position of the vocal cords and our ability to control our breath and our ability for language. This is a picture of Lakshmi's daughter Manjula playing the drums and singing a song for one of the festivals that I attended. And this is very much a cultural festival, but in lots of ways it's also been shaped by biology. So that's kind of where we're going to leave off for now, and we'll talk a bit more about different aspects of anthropology and follow up on some of these thoughts in the next part. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you shortly.